Hello, I'm Jyotika. Welcome to Excelling Psychology. The most frequent request I get to make a video is the 16 marker question. So, students always worried about how to answer the 16 marker. I've addressed it in my previous videos in which I've solved past papers, but yeah, I'm making a dedicated video to it. In my most recent video, I covered the ASH conformity study for a long answer, 16 or 20 marks. So, the comments I got is why don't you make a video for a theory based question, because students have understood, okay, if a study is being asked for, we need to summarize AO1 in terms of aims, procedure, results and conclusion. But what if a theory is asked for, then how do we cover that? So in this video I'm taking a theory based question. As you can see, the question is about behavioral approach to explaining phobias from the psychopathology unit. And within behavioral approach, in the syllabus, you have to learn the two process model. So it's definitely a theory. I've taken that. And I will explain to you as I write the answer in front of you, how to structure it, how to meet mark scheme requirements, how to avoid commonly made mistakes. So that is what we'll do in today's video. This question is for 16 marks. The largest question which comes in UK AQA curriculum. But if for other Oxford AQA International, the same question can be asked for 20 marks. So I'll give you tips how to cover it if it comes for 20 marks also. The same question also comes for 12 marks in either curriculum. So I'll explain to you how you need to cover for that as well. So major, my point of view today is going to be that it is for 16 marks. But if in case it comes for a different total marks, I will explain to you how to cover for that as well. I have not taken today memory or social influence. I know those are the earlier units, but I've already covered them quite a lot. And I haven't taken attachment because, again, there are too many studies in attachment. So, again, it would become a study based question. Theories we find more in the psychopathology unit. So, I've taken the question from there. Okay, so I'll start explaining to you with the structure of the answer. And then I'll write out a sample answer, just a model answer. You can refer to it. Of course, your answer can be totally different from what I'm writing, but just to give you a concrete example of how to implement whatever tips I'm giving you, I will write the answer. I will upload this answer on my website and link it for download in the description box and comment section, pinned comment below. Definitely, you can directly download it and learn from it, but the commentary that I'm going to give you in this video will be more helpful to you in how to write the answers. So I would strongly recommend you watch this video and write along with me. Be active, like keep writing with me. If you do that over the course of this video, you'll have learned a lot by the end of it. The same question can be phrased a little differently. The command term, instead of outline and evaluate, it could be discuss the behavioral approach to explaining phobias. Regardless, you have to write the answer in the same way that I'm writing here. When a 16 marker is asked, AO1, that is description, is worth 6 marks, and AO3, that is evaluation, is worth 10 marks. Sometimes you have that application type of question in which a scenario is given and that is worth 16 marks. So you have AO1 for 4 marks, AO2 for 4 marks, and AO3 for 8 marks. If you would like me to cover an answer of that nature, let me know in the comments box below. Right now I've taken a very simple direct type of question which has only AO1 and AO3. Now AO1, as you know, is description. First I'll just tell you I'll give you some broad guidance on how you should cover it. Of course, details I'll get into when I'm writing the answer. Broad guidance for AO1 is just write it in a single paragraph, or at the most, like, you can break it down to 2 paragraphs because it's the 2 process model. Maybe one you want to take on classical conditioning, second on operant, that's fine. But generally, I recommend taking a single paragraph. The examiner knows that AO1 is right here. If you look at the mark scheme requirements, mainly they look out for thorough details. Explicit knowledge should be there, understanding should be there. Knowledge, like understanding, is inherent in that, which means that, one, they don't want you to just jot down like bullet points factually, just giving the name of who gave the theory, and one line definitions of each. For example, in this answer I'm going to cover classical conditioning. So if I just give what is UCS, what is CS, what is UCR, and I don't link any of it, I just give it as if I've learned each definition and sub definition, that doesn't count for knowledge. It just counts for information. When I explain how these are related, especially if I use examples and explain what is the connection between them and ultimately how they link to phobia, then I'm showing my knowledge or my understanding of the theory. That is what is expected here. So don't treat the content that you have learned in a piecemeal fashion, that I just need to give these terms. So literally I'll count these terms I had to give in two process model. Let me write one line on each. Let me give one definition of phobia. That's not how you're expected to do it. That is very obvious rote learning, which they are not looking out for. They're looking out for your understanding of the material. More about this I'll demonstrate. Also, when they say details, they mean it. So when you're explaining classical conditioning, if you're explaining it without any reference to unconditioned stimulus, conditioned stimulus, like those very key terms which are there in classical conditioning. Say you're just giving a very broad example from the Little Albert study or something and saying that's how phobia is acquired. That's not detailed knowledge. That's very limited knowledge. You have not explained the full process. Every component of the process you're not explaining. So you have to bring about every component to show that you know the details. That is important. And as you do that, you will realize that you cover good terminology as well. Terminology is one more important requirement, as they call it in the AQA curriculum, specialist terminology. So specialist terminology just meaning that you use terms which are specific to that theory. Firstly, you don't use casual language, you use psychological language. I've addressed this in my previous videos in detail. You can watch those. Secondly, you write terms which are specific to classical conditioning when you're talking about classical conditioning, not just repeatedly talking about behavior, which is general to the behavioral approach. Classical conditioning is within behavioral approach. What is specific to classical conditioning? Those terms you need to bring out. So again, conditioned stimulus, unconditioned stimulus, those terms should be there in your answer. That's expected. Many students say, I understood the material well and I explained in my own words. But when there is a mark scheme requirement which is explicitly telling you specialist terminology, then how can they give you marks if you haven't used that terminology? That's why you need to be exam smart. No doubt you need to know the content very well. But just assuming that reading, rereading the textbook and knowing the content will help you write a good answer, no. Meeting the requirements of the mark scheme will help you write a good answer. So you need to keep this in view when you're writing. Coming to AO3, I always suggest for a 16 marker, you give 3 evaluation points. Evaluation point, as you know, can be a strength or a weakness, can be both. In the same point also, you can show two sides of the same issue. It just makes for a balanced answer if you give both strengths and weaknesses. Like say behavioral approach is asked here, at least some points should be strength and some should be weaknesses. If you are one-sided, like many students give only weaknesses, they know the critical points very well, criticism type of points. No doubt you can do that. There's no restriction that you can't give all weaknesses, but it doesn't show a very balanced perspective in my opinion. So my preference is for AO3 evaluation, you give as many paragraphs as you're giving points. So I would give 3 paragraphs. In my previous videos, I have explained the depth versus breadth approach a lot. When you write more than 3 paragraphs, that is, say you take 5, 6, 7 evaluation points because you've referenced a lot of sources. So for behavioral approach, you know lots of different strengths and weaknesses. What happens in that process is inevitably you will sacrifice depth for breadth. You cannot cover so much in detail. Like I have not come across any student yet who's covering 6, 7 evaluation points in great detail. They just touch upon the points. When they write 6, 7 evaluation, each point is just like 2 to 3 sentences. There's no thorough explanation in those points. and that is not effective. You are expected to give a detailed evaluation which gives your understanding. And when they say detailed evaluation, they mean every evaluation point should be detailed, not that in total there should be a huge count of evaluation points. So my strong recommendation is 3 paragraphs, each in Peel format, thoroughly explained, focusing on depth rather than breadth. Don't be under that illusion that if I write 6, 7 evaluation points, it shows I know so much. It doesn't show that you know so much. What shows you know so much is when you write a point thoroughly. That's where you show your knowledge, your knowing, or your understanding. That I don't just like remember this is a point. I've actually understood what this point is. I'm able to thoroughly explain it. That shows your knowledge. The count of how many points you can give does not show your knowledge. So I strongly recommend you structure it as 3 different paragraphs. Here also the same rules apply which apply for AO1. Good terminology should be used. Detailed knowledge should be there. There should be good expansion of arguments given. So again, you can see expansion of argument is mentioned in the mark scheme. So when you just write 2, 3 lines of an evaluation point, where is the expansion? So you will inevitably miss out on this. Also, your answer has to be overall, like for AO1 and AO3, clear, coherent, and focused. Especially, I would emphasize on this when it comes to AO3. Clarity, coherence, focus is very important. AO3, many students don't give it. Like AO1, they learn very well because more or less they memorize exactly as given in the textbook. Weaknesses start coming up when the AO3 points are given. So clarity, coherence, focus is very important because in AO3, giving irrelevant points is a strong tendency. Like for this example, I can tell you many students will give treatment related points. Though they have explicitly asked for explanation of phobias, students will give points from systematic desensitization. If you're giving it in terms of it's an application of the behavioral explanation, yes, that's a good point. You can say that systematic desensitization is based on this explanation. But they don't mention that. They don't say that it's an application of this theory. They just start explaining systematic desensitization in one of the evaluation points without any context for why it's being included. And they go into the absolute nitty gritties of systematic desensitization. So it seems highly irrelevant. Where's the focus? Where is the clarity when you're just introducing anything which appears to be random into the answer? So make sure whatever you're writing is logical, one point is following from the other, and always, no matter what you're writing, AO1 or AO3, it's directly addressing the topic which is given. You can never stray away from the topic. So these are some general guidelines you must have in mind before writing the answer. Many students have a misconception that AO1 and AO3 have equal weightage in a 16 marker. I hope now it's clear to you AO3 has more weightage than AO1. Keep that in mind when you're learning, when you're practicing for your exams. Make sure AO3 is very strong for you because many students AO3 is very weak, AO1 is strong, they've learned it properly from the textbook. So majority marks are for AO3. That's why they score very poorly on the 16 marker. Now, if you're writing the same answer for 20 marks instead of 3 paragraphs for evaluation, I would recommend expanding it to 4 paragraphs. AO1 you can write in the same way that I'm writing in this video, even if you're writing for 20 marks, because as you can see, there's no requirement that your answer should be long to get marks. So you'll feel for 20 marks, I should write something more in AO1. Length is not a requirement to give marks. So regardless of this introduction which I'm going to give AO1, whether you're going to give it for 16, 12 or 20 marker, as long as it's detailed, has specialist terminology and all, you're going to get marks for it. So you can retain this in the same way. AO3, just add one more evaluation point. Just like here I'm going to add 3. I'll give you suggestions when I write. For 12 marker, reduce 1 evaluation point. Instead of 3 paragraphs, give 2 evaluation points in details. Because for a 12 marker, AO1 is 4 marks and AO3 is 8 marks. So you can condense one evaluation point. Roughly we take one evaluation point is worth 4 marks. So you can reduce on that. AO1 still I will say keep it the same way, because you need to thoroughly explain and in detail what the two process model is. Okay, now I'm starting to write the answer. You need not give any introduction or conclusion for these type of answers. You can straight away begin with the AO1 content. So directly I'll begin with what the two process model is. I do remember the name of the researcher who's given the model. If you don't, it's not mandatory that you remember, but if you do mention, it's good. So we can say Maurer proposed the two process model of development of phobias. So I begin from there. Now I need to explain the two processes. So my thought process is constantly just to move in the flow. I mentioned two processes. Now let me explain the first process. The first process, that of classical conditioning, explains how phobias are first acquired. Now here you can see I've already started using terminology, classical conditioning. Some students, like some of you might feel that's not possible, but it does happen. They don't even remember the name of the sub-theory which is coming within this. Like they don't remember classical conditioning. So they'll say that first phobias are acquired by linking something, connecting something. You have to use the word classical conditioning. Yes, you can call it learning by association, but at least once you need to mention that the process is called classical conditioning. Otherwise, you're not making use of specialist terminology. It suggests that an unconditioned stimulus that naturally evokes fear is associated with a neutral stimulus that does not naturally evoke fear. Now I have used terminology again, unconditioned stimulus. Don't confuse between what is unconditioned, conditioned, neutral. Firstly, be clear in your mind about the concepts before you write. So make sure you've understood well. Also, don't directly start using terms like UCS, CS and all. Make sure first at least once, like I'm giving in this answer, you write the full name, unconditioned stimulus, in bracket you can write UCS, then onwards you can refer to it as UCS. But right from the start, don't say UCS, explain what it is. So UCS is associated with neutral stimulus. Eventually, the fear response that is the unconditioned response towards the UCS is given towards the NS as well, such that the NS is converted into a conditioned stimulus. So here I have explained basically what these terms are, but still it doesn't show very thorough knowledge on my part. Because have I really understood what these concepts are? That is still not clear. I've been able to define these concepts and show how they're linked with each other, but how will I be able to show my understanding of them? Best with the help of an example, or at least some elaboration I will have to give on this. The little Albert example is very good over here, and I will take that to explain these concepts. But like I've said, this is a model answer. This is not the only thing you can give. There are other ways of explaining also. So you can also give a general example, like someone has, say, a fear of dogs, by associating the dogs with a painful bite that they have experienced or they've seen someone experiencing. That is also an acceptable way of explaining. What I want to tell you is that it is not compulsory that you have to only give the Little Albert study. That's optional. Okay, so now I will explain this has been demonstrated in the classic study of Little Albert by Watson and Rayner. Albert was a 9-month-old infant, naturally afraid of loud noises, researchers Watson and Rayner conducted a procedure with him such that they kept making a loud noise while presenting a white rat to him over several trials. It was found that Albert, who was initially not afraid of the white rat, began to fear the white rat by the end of the procedure. It was said that Albert had become classically conditioned into developing a phobia of white rats. Okay, now you can see I have explained the Little Albert study, but not in great detail. How many trials were there, what was done on each trial, how the sound was made exactly, like by banging the vessel and the like clanging the vessel. All those things I've not explained about the steel hammer and all. Those are unnecessary details. We always have to keep in view what we are explaining largely. Here, what I'm explaining in the larger picture is the two-process model within that classical conditioning. Little Albert's study is just serving as an example of classical conditioning. I'm not discussing the study for the sake of discussing the study. I'm discussing it to exemplify what I've written about classical conditioning. So it is not worth writing more than this about the Little Albert study, like giving too many examples or specific details from the study is not required. So as much as suffices and doesn't lose focus. We saw one important criteria is clarity, coherence and focus. So as much as does not lose focus, does not become a discussion of Little Albert instead of the main topic, I have covered that much. So make sure you take that focused approach when you're writing. Of course, further I can say that, Albert also became fearful of related objects like a Santa Claus mask or a white rabbit, anything that was white and furry. But again, I'm not finding it very relevant right now. Generalization is a part of classical conditioning, but I haven't introduced it at the beginning because I feel for 6 marks worth of EO1, this much for classical conditioning is enough. I also need to cover operant conditioning. So I don't want to get into secondary details like generalization at the moment. I have told you at the beginning, this is a model answer. Your approach can be different. In your view, generalization might be something important that you feel you need to discuss. Absolutely, you can include it. I am not finding it relevant in my writing approach to include it. So I am not including it. Now I would like to move towards the second process. I have covered one process of the two process model. Now I would like to cover the second process. I can break a paragraph here and take another one, but I like to write the entire EO1 in a single paragraph. So again, it's a matter of choice. Okay, so I would say the second process, that of, now you can call it operant or instrumental conditioning, either term is correct. It's your choice which one you have learned, you can write that. So that of operant conditioning explains how phobias once acquired are maintained in the long run. Here it's very important to use the term negative reinforcement, that's the specialist terminology here, and to again explain what negative reinforcement is using good terms. Also to use terms like avoidance behavior, that is also specialist terminology related to operant conditioning. So it proposes that once a phobia is acquired, avoidance behavior is shown towards the feared stimulus. Now here I'll explain this with an example because it is very jargonish. So to show that I understand what this means concretely, I'll give an example. For example, if a child has developed phobia of a white rat, it will do its best to avoid the white rat, or I can say avoid encountering the white rat. This avoidance proves to be negatively reinforcing. Now I need to explain what is negative reinforcement. Again, I could have given a general definition of reinforcement and shown the distinction between positive and negative reinforcement. But again, would that be focused? That is the question. Am I explaining these concepts for their own sake? Am I trying to show my knowledge of what reinforcement is, what types of reinforcement are? Or am I trying to explain the two process model? As of now, I'm trying to explain the two process model. So straying away into unnecessary details which don't really link back to the two process model, I would avoid giving that. Helps me to keep the answer precise also. Otherwise, the answer will become unnecessarily lengthy. So I will just explain what negative reinforcement is, that also in the context of phobia, not beyond that, because I need to be focused. So now negative reinforcement, what it is here, I need to say that is the avoidance helps encountering a an unpleasant experience of having to face a white rat, which provokes great anxiety, and this proves to be indirectly rewarding to the child. Okay, so that is what I can explain for operant conditioning. So now I have completed writing the AO1 paragraph. What I want you to see is, in this paragraph, like I'll give you a quick revision how I have met mark scheme requirements. I have used good terminology, like even the sub theories I've named correctly: classical conditioning, operant conditioning. Within those theories, also the concepts which are there: unconditioned stimulus, neutral stimulus. I have explained, of course, I haven't explained them generically. Like some people, how they'll explain it generically is by, say, giving Pavlov's study. Pavlov's study in which the dog was taught to salivate to the bell. That is not a fear based study. That is just the first study which brought about the principle of classical conditioning. So, if I would write about that, I would lose focus from my answer. Because here they don't want to know generally what classical conditioning is, they want to know what it is with respect to phobia. So you can see throughout I have spoken about fear, anxiety. In those terms, I have explained these concepts like NS, UCS, CS. In those terms, I have explained them. So my answer remains focused. Also, I have given details because I have explained even things like initially it's a neutral stimulus, then it becomes conditioned once it's associated with UCS. If instead I would have just written directly, there was this little Albert study, in that the conditioned stimulus was the white rat, then there wouldn't be detail. Like I'm not linking one concept to the other. I'm not showing from where one concept is coming. Like why is there a fear of the white rat in the first place? So I have given details also. I have taken a relevant study, that of little Albert, that I have linked with the main topic to show my understanding of it, to show detailed knowledge. Like not only I'm able to show my understanding in details, because Albert's study has all those details of everything, UCS, CS, everything. So I have included that also. And like I had mentioned that time, I have included only as much of the study as justifies explaining those concepts which are written earlier, not unnecessary detail from the study. Same approach I have taken towards operant conditioning. Again, there's too much to explain in the larger theory of operant conditioning. Some students will also go to write about Skinner box. But does that have any relevance to phobia? In the same way, like I pointed out, a general definition of reinforcement or its schedules or its types, does it have anything to do with phobia? So I have avoided writing all of that. Rather than that, my full energy has been towards negative reinforcement. Now, because that was not really tested out in the Albert study, that was just about classical conditioning, that was not about the two process model. So I have used a similar example, general example, to show how negative reinforcement could take place in a situation like that. Sometimes, again, this might seem unnecessary, but it actually happens, so I'm pointing it out. Sometimes students will give like hypothetical or assumed details. Like this example, when they want to give, they'll actually use Albert's name and say Albert must have continued with his phobia because of negative reinforcement. I would suggest avoid doing that if something has not actually been verified in a study. Don't add your own hypothetical or assumed details to it. Rather, you can give a general example like I have given. What happens is the examiner might get confused while checking, and they might think you actually believe all that was done in Albert's study, like negative reinforcement was also tested in some way. So then they'll believe your knowledge of the study is not accurate. So just avoid doing those type of things. So this much suffices for AO1. As I had said previously, even if you're writing a 12 or 20 marker instead of the 16 marker, you can write this exactly. Yes, it will seem time consuming for a 12 marker, but then this is what helps you to show proper details and meet all the requirements of the mark scheme. Like if you're to omit anything from this just to reduce length, it will be difficult to meet requirements of the mark scheme. Now I will come towards AO3 points. For this I'll take 3 separate paragraphs. I told you in the beginning my preference is to give a balanced answer. I'll begin with the strength and then I'll come towards weaknesses. As far as the two process model is concerned, first I'll just brainstorm a few strengths in front of you, what all possibilities are there, like what all you can take within this. You can talk about application, that's a very strong point, how this theory has lent to applications like systematic desensitization of flooding, which are today the most promising theories for dealing with phobia, most prominent CBT theories. Definitely that's a very big strength. Just don't lose focus if you're writing about those things. Other strengths which you can give are that definitely it helps to show the nurture side of development of phobias. Otherwise, genetic or biological theories are heavily focused on nature. So this helps to show how phobias can be acquired as well. In fact, when these theories came, they were quite revolutionary, because before these theories, all assumptions used to be about biological, like phobias are biological. That was the assumption. Another strength you can give is, which always applies to all behavioral theories, like you can keep this mind for your behavioral or learning approach when you do the approaches. They are very scientific. They are meant to be scientific. So they really lend themselves to testing. Like when it comes to the little Albert study, if you see the way they have manipulated the association between the sound and the white rat. All that is made possible, that experimentation is made possible because they really break down the process into components, and then those components can be verified by associating them, for example. So it's highly scientific in nature, which makes these theories very valid. The behavioral approach is very scientific in nature. Let me just think other possible strengths. That is what is coming to my mind as of now. If I remember anything again in the course, I will tell you. Coming to weaknesses of this behavioral approach, definitely it is reductionist, like drawing from the point which I just gave, that it does not support nature at all. That means it's just giving one side or partial account of how phobias develop. It would be wrong to assume that biology is playing no role in the development of phobias. So, a more holistic approach would be the one which would account for genetic predisposition also, plus any acquisition which is taking place. So that we can take as reductionism versus holism. That's a very strong point. Now, if we want to write a point on reductionism, always keep in mind, like before you write it, be sure you can explain the other side. If you're going to give something very generic, like genes also play a role, but you're not going to name which genes play a role in phobia, you don't remember what is the biology behind phobia, then it is best to avoid giving such points, because it's serving no purpose. Like it will be taken as generic. You won't be able to explain in detail. Another weakness, you can focus on the little Albert study, particularly like how you can read into the weakness is. In general, the studies which have been conducted have been like case studies. And one example is the little Albert study. It's very difficult to generalize. Again, be ready to give specific points for whichever evaluation you give. Like in the case of little Albert study, why it might not be generalizable, Albert Watson himself had described that was a emotionally less responsive child. Generally, children do get scared of rats, moving objects, and all. Albert was quite insensitive to begin with only. Like he would not get agitated on seeing these things. That's quite rare for a child. So he seems to be an unusual case. So the way he developed phobia after lots of efforts and lot of trials, maybe for other children that much effort would not be required. Like they would naturally show the phobia, or they would be able to develop it within a few trials. So you need to, like if you're taking a point on generalizability is poor, for that matter any point you're taking, can you really bring about the reasoning behind why generalizability would be difficult from little Albert's study? Then only take it up, otherwise avoid taking it. Like if you're just going to say it's a single child, that's why it's not generalizable, that's not an effective point. You have to be able to explain further. Okay, again, other weaknesses, let me just think about it. Okay, as of now nothing is coming to my mind. In the course of writing, if I can think of any point, I will explain to you immediately. Also, keep in mind these general points which I have given you, because, like I said, if you're writing for 20 mark, you will need more than what I'm writing here. So, what I've told you orally, you could take up one of those points as your fourth point. Yeah, something else is also coming to my mind, although it's reductionism only. When I explained reductionism, I just took the example of biological explanation, not necessary. You can take up some other explanation also to show why this one is reductionist. For example, you might have learned about the DiNardo study that's given in many books. How people can acquire a phobia of dogs just by imagining negative possible consequences, like without having any real experience that's bad with the dog. So that kind of questions the validity of this explanation also, that despite not having undergone any association, how come people are getting scared of dogs? So you can give it as an alternate explanation which questions the validity also, or you can take it as reductionism, that this one does not account for cognitive explanations. If you choose to take, just one last thing before I write, if you choose to take little Albert ethics as a weakness, because for many students that comes in mind, that the child was made to undergo trauma. In that case, also keep in mind how you present it is very important. It should have relevance to two process model. So if you're trying to say that lots of research done in this area has been unethical, caused trauma to participants, yes, that's correct. But if you're going to evaluate little Albert study, like just for the sake of it, you'll keep on giving points on little Albert, it should not appear as if your full focus has shifted totally to little Albert study from the two process model. So just keep that in mind when you are explaining. Okay, so now I'll start with the first point. I would like to give a strength first. I'll give the strength of treatment. That's a very strong strength. And when I give that, I will explain to you what I mean by keeping it linked to the explanation. Following the peel format, if you want to know more about it, please watch my previous videos. Right now, I'll just show you how I'm following it. I'll give my point first. One strength of the behavioral approach is that it has resulted in the development of behavioral therapies of phobia that have been found to be highly successful in treatment. For example, the famous systematic desensitization therapy based on classical conditioning presented by Volpe is based on this approach. Okay, so I want you to see how I'm keeping on linking back to the explanation by specifying which concepts from the explanation have come to use to develop this therapy. Rather than talking about some statistics that I've learned, like say this therapy has proved to be useful in so many cases, or comparing with this therapy with some other therapies which are available like anxiolytics, comparing to those, that would lose focus, because then my evaluation would become about systematic desensitization. I have to keep on talking about this therapy in terms of how the explanation has helped to produce this therapy. So that will be my focus throughout this point. In this therapy, the association between the UCS and CS is broken such that the CS no longer provokes a fear response. Rather, the phobic patient is trained to associate the CS with a UCS that naturally evokes relaxation and calm. Then, the response of relaxation given to the UCS is given to the CS as well after training, breaking or putting an end to the phobia. Again, I can give a simple example to just explain this. For example, if a child has associated a white rat with a loud noise, they can now be taught in systematic desensitization to associate the white rat with muscle relaxation or deep breathing, which will result in a response of relaxation towards the white rat as well. Okay, so here now I'll just explain this point to you. You can see I've given it in detail, and now you'll be able to also see why 3 points are enough, because every point is going to be detailed in my answer. Like I told you, my focus is entirely on connecting how the explanation has resulted in the therapy for systematic desensitization, rather than talking about the reciprocal inhibition or the hierarchy or anything which is then systematic desensitization. That is not relevant here. What is relevant is basically how classical conditioning principle has been used, how behavioral approach has been used to develop this therapy. So that is what I meant by when I told you whenever you give a point, it should be focused. This is how it remains focused. If you're not able to explain it this way, then avoid taking this point. You have so many options, take another point. That's why when you collect so many strengths and weaknesses from different sources, say you've undergone 10 textbooks or 10 types of notes and you've made this huge collection. Students show me they've made this collection of strengths and weaknesses for every point. That's very good, but depends on how you approach it. If you approach it that I need to write all of this in my answer to show I know a lot of evaluation, that's not good. But if you take it to decide, okay, which of these points I can explain best, so let me select 3 points from here which in my 16 marker I will be able to explain in full detail, then it's very useful to collect all those strengths and weaknesses. If you will be able to explain like this, how I have explained here, then take up this point, otherwise substitute it with some other strength which you have learned about. Okay, also I followed the peel format because I've given the point, this is the strength, then I have elaborated by linking it to systematic desensitization, then I've further elaborated or explained why it is a strength by showing how exactly behavioral approach has helped in development of this treatment. And of course, I have linked back by saying that this is how ultimately relaxation will be reached or the phobia will be erased. Now, I'd like to take a weakness. The reductionism weakness that I was talking about earlier, I'd like to demonstrate how you can take that up. If I take it that it is reductionist because it does not focus on the role of nature or biological explanations. One weakness of this approach is that it is reductionist. So again, I've named the point first, because it does not account for the contribution of nature towards phobias. It has been well established in genetic research that inheriting a de novo mutation can increase predisposition towards developing anxiety disorders like phobias. Okay, what I had told you earlier, if you're taking genetics as a point, you need to be able to point out specific genes which are contributing to the disorder. If I don't talk about the de novo mutation and lead it to the candidate gene, then I'm giving a very general point. Like if I just say genes also contribute, that is something I can write for any disorder, phobia, depression, OCD. In all cases, genes also contribute. So I can't just say genes contribute. I need to specify which gene contributes to the phobia. So with this help of the de novo mutation, I'm going to lead into the gene. Okay, so de novo mutation can be linked to NTRK3 gene. This mutation results in duplication of a segment of genes on chromosome 15 known as DUP25, which causes malfunctioning of the NTRK3 gene. Ultimately, this results in malfunctioning of NT3 neurotropin receptors, causing excessive release of noradrenaline, heightening awareness and arousal in an individual, making them more prone to giving fear reactions and developing phobias. Okay, so if I'm to explain about genes, like whenever any topic, you say that it is reductionist. The other side, you have to be able to give an explicit detail and show that this exactly is what is missing in the behavioral explanation. Now, don't assume that we are straying away from the topic and we are talking too much about the genetic explanation. We are not, because this is relevant to pointing out what all is missing in the behavioral explanation. I've written from that point of view. I'm saying that it is ignoring nature, and I'm saying this all is what is being ignored. If any time we take a reductionism point of view and we just assume we don't need to write anything from the other side, because see, I'm focused on the behavioral approach. Why should I talk about the genetic approach? Because then you're not showing exactly what is missing out in the behavioral approach. You need to expand on that. We saw expansion is important. So, of course, we don't give irrelevant details from the genetic explanation. But what I've given here is relevant, and further I'm going to make it more relevant by linking back now to the behavioral explanation. So I'll show you now how we can talk about it. It is highly possible, therefore, that having a predisposition towards phobia by inheriting the de novo mutation, when an individual is exposed to association between a UCS that naturally evokes fear and CS, is when they develop phobia. So phobia is likely to be a combined result of the disposition and exposure to classical conditioning. So here I'm showing how a holistic explanation would be better, because as we know, not everyone who undergoes classical conditioning develops fear. There can be people who have seen, for example, many bad instances of, say, abuse being done in their homes, and they do not become very fearful of the abuser. There are such cases, they retaliate. So how come they don't develop a fear when the abuser is constantly being associated with the abuse, which is fearful? This can be the reason, because they don't have a genetic predisposition. So somewhere first that underlying predisposition is there, which gets combined with the classical conditioning process, and then the person develops fear. This would be a more complete explanation that takes into account nature and nurture. So we need to explain this way. Again, if this point is difficult for you to explain, you can definitely omit this and take some other point instead. You have a lot of options. That is basic. I just want you to focus on how I'm writing the points, not that you have to write these points and worry about whether you'll be able to write them or not. Just see the approach of writing them. Like I had said before, for the reductionism point, you can take the cognitive explanation instead of genetic. Then it won't be about nature versus nurture. Then it will be just about, without association, also how fears can develop just by thinking. One point I'll give from Little Albert's study also. Like I said, you can use the study as an example in terms of strength or weakness. I would take a strength when it comes to the Albert study instead of taking the weakness of generalizability or ethics. So one strength is that research into the behavioral approach has been highly scientific, lending validity to the explanation. For example, the study on Little Albert described above was done in a highly controlled environment with manipulation of key variables by the researchers. Now, one thing I want you to notice within evaluation also, how I'm using specialist terminology. I'm using terms like controls and manipulation. That is good terminology. Besides that, I also want you to see how I'm not going to leave any point generic, I am going to make it specific. So when I say manipulation is done in Watson study, I have to say exactly of what. And when I say control has been maintained, what factors have been controlled. So further I will explain that. That is, all trials were done in a laboratory setting where it was ensured that only the loud noise created by researchers and no other variables such as how agitated the rat was or presence of other fearful stimuli in the environment could cause induction of phobia in Albert. Okay, so in real life, if I get scared of a rat, can be because the rat is very violent or agitated, like it's something about the rat which is making me scared of it. Here, the researchers made sure that was not the case. The rat was very friendly and passive. So they can be sure it's because of the loud noise that Albert is scared and not because of the rat or for that matter, any other factor. So there's been very good control in their environment. Besides that, more importantly, they manipulated the presentation of the loud noise, that's the UCS, just immediately after the presentation of the rat to ensure that the association was made between these two stimuli only. So the fear that Albert developed could be confidently attributed to this UCS only, increasing the validity of classical conditioning being the reason for acquisition of phobias. Okay, so make sure you can explain the Little Albert study in this context and keep it as an example of other types of research which have been done in the area. The strength is that the two process model is supported by scientific studies. Again, we are not evaluating Little Albert's study for its own sake. We are evaluating it to show the strength of the two process model, to show that classical conditioning is an accurate explanation of why these type of phobias develop. Now, one thing you will notice is that in my elaboration, that evaluation, like AO3, I haven't really spoken about negative reinforcement, the other process. Operant conditioning, I have not evaluated at all. You can evaluate that as well. You can talk about how negative reinforcement is prevented in exposure therapy. So you can link it to the behavioral therapy of exposure as a strength. In exposure therapy, what is done, or in flooding for that matter, people are directly exposed to the stimulus which they fear. They are not given an opportunity to avoid it. So there is no question of them being able to avoid and indirectly feel rewarded. So they learn to face their fears head on, which helps in eradicating the fear. So definitely that can be one of the evaluation points that is coming to my mind now. On negative reinforcement, one more thing why it is merit worthy is because it's a very uh, logical explanation for why fear perpetuates itself. If you look at a person who's phobic, there is no reward that they are being given from the outside to be phobic. Like no one is giving them a treat for having their phobia. So there's no obvious positive reinforcement that they are getting, although some critics have argued, but I'm keeping that aside right now. Like they have said maybe sympathy or tension, but everyone is not getting that. So without any obvious reward, like what is a person getting for being scared of rats or dogs or anything? Nothing. This by itself, the avoidance by itself proves to be rewarding and helps to maintain the phobia, is a very logical explanation based on very strong reasoning. That is also a strength of negative reinforcement. Amongst weaknesses, like I just gave that point right now, you can take that as a weakness. And many researchers have argued it's not negative reinforcement, rather, in many cases, it's positive reinforcement, which leads to continuation of the phobia. Many people enjoy the sympathy and the attention they get for being phobic, at least subconsciously, which helps to maintain the phobia. So there are direct rather than indirect rewards. So from the negative reinforcement parts, that's the second process of dual process. Also, there are possible evaluation points. And before I forget, also to tell you about a little more about the mark scheme. Of course, your objective will be that in the mark scheme you want to score 16 marks, full 16 of 16. So in the mark scheme, the highest mark band as such is the range of 13 to 16 for a 16 marker. For 20 markers, it will be 16 to 20 and likewise. Now, to get into that 13 to 16 marker, and especially if you want to get full 16, you definitely have to follow all the guidelines given above. Besides that, if you feel that okay, if I don't give some points, maybe it'll go a little down from 16, say I can still secure 14, 15. That depends on what type of weakness is there in your answer. This mark band permits you to like fall a little bit from 16 to 15 and all, provided you're not giving some minor details. If you're not giving major details, then it's going to fall down even further, like it's going to go below 13. Now what I mean by that, I'll give you an example from this answer itself. In this answer, a major detail is, say, in AO1, operant conditioning. Supposing I explain the two process model and I don't describe operant conditioning at all. So I just talk about classical conditioning. I have missed a major detail because out of two processes, I've not given one. So if I think that, okay, I've not given operant conditioning, so they won't give me 16, but they'll give me maybe 14 or 15. No, because you have omitted a major detail. That is not permitted to be in this mark band. If you've omitted a minor detail, then you can be in this mark band. So say, for example, some minor detail like classical conditioning you've explained fully, but you have forgotten to write that there is an unconditioned response, a natural response of fear towards the unconditioned stimulus. That's fine. That's a minor detail. Yes, you will lose marks for it, but you won't slip off from the mark band completely. Or like I said, a detailing morer, in fact, for that you will not lose any marks. If you have not written, still you can get full 16 marks. So when you feel that I've skipped some points, so I lose marks, don't literally count the points and assume how many marks you will lose. Every point has its own weightage. So for missing this type of a point, you might lose too many marks. For missing that type of a point, you might lose very less marks. So you need to keep that in mind. So the way of finding out how much you will lose, first of all, don't aim to lose at all. Make sure you write perfect answers in your practice. But to find out how much you can lose, consider how important that point is to the topic. Don't consider how many points are there. Also, same thing example, I'll give you an evaluation. Mostly this applies to description, but even in the case of evaluation, supposing I have mentioned that treatment has been very successful, which is based on behavioral approach. But then I have not named the treatment, or even if I have named it, I have not explained anything about it. That's a major point which is missing. Not naming the treatment which has emerged, not explaining what that treatment is, like not even giving a definition of that treatment. So suppose I just write systematic desensitization. How do we know, is it a biological treatment, is it a behavioral treatment at all? So that's a major detail which you're skipping. So again, your answer will just fall off from the highest mark band. But yes, if there's some minor detail that you haven't written about, for example, while explaining systematic desensitization, relaxation and all is very important. You can't skip that. But let's say, for example, you have not written about the, like I said, hierarchy, reciprocal inhibition, that anyways you won't lose marks because they're not directly related to behavioral approach. But let's say, for example, if it forgotten to give an example for systematic desensitization, you've just explained it in process, that's like omission of a minor detail, not giving an example. Again, you can score full 16 also, depends how you've written the rest of the point, even if you've not given the example, or maybe you just lose a mark or something and you come down to 15 because the example is not there, so explanation is not clear of the point or elaboration is not clear. So you won't lose much marks for not giving an example. But not writing about the treatment at all and just making a general point that there is treatment, that will take you down from the 13 to 16 mark band. Okay, I have written similar answers in past videos also, especially past paper solving videos, so you can get more tips and guidance on how to answer different type of topics from those videos. So make sure you watch those as well. If you have any other suggestions like I had given you, if you want me to cover those type of questions which have a scenario which come for 16 mark, you can leave that suggestion in the comment box below. Any other specific videos you want me to make, you can leave your comments in the box below, or anything that you want to convey to me about this or related videos, you can talk about them in the comments box. I do answer relevant comments. If you want tuition for psychology, if you want to book your classes, you can contact me on my phone number or email ID below. Please do not contact me personally for anything on the video. Please use the comments box for that purpose. I will not respond in private for video related questions. Okay, so that's it for this video. Thank you for watching this, and I will see you soon with another video. Goodbye.